Hello, loves. Today I have compiled quite a few good stories. Let's get started. Story: Why are adults unkind to children that come from disadvantaged families? I grew up in a dysfunctional family, to say the least. Family violence, perpetrated by both my parents to each other and towards the children, and my oldest brother was very violent with the other siblings too. The abuse was mostly physical, verbal/psychological, but also some of my siblings were sexually molested by a friend of the family. There was also a vast amount of neglect. I broke my arm and my parents didn't take me to the hospital for weeks, never went to the dentist, didn't even go to school from grade 2 onwards. Often there were times where there wasn't enough food to eat, and because we had to rely on tank water, there were periods of time where we wouldn't have money to get water carted in, so there wouldn't be any water to shower or flush the toilet with. My mom was a victim of abuse from my father on more occasions than I can actually remember, including an attempt of strangulation to the point of unconsciousness that I witnessed. He told me that was in your honor after my mom had accused him of sexually molesting me. He also attacked her so severely on one occasion while pregnant that it resulted in a stillbirth. My dad is a piece of shit. From what I understand, he grew up in a daily unstable environment, but as an adult I cannot accept that he didn't have the capacity to change and that it was solely generational trauma he was passing down. He chose to be the way he was and took no steps to attempt to change. My mom, without a shadow of a doubt, has an undiagnosed mental illness. She is a compulsive liar. She'd make up anything that would get people to give her things/sympathy. She was a drug addict, addicted to any legal opioid she could get her hands on. This was mostly medication such as paracetamol, codeine, or just straight-up codeine when it was available to purchase OTC. She'd pharmacy hop daily, and there were a few pharmacists that she knew so well she'd send different siblings in with notes to purchase medication for her. She treated most of her kids, some she treated better, worse than I'd treat my enemy. She called me little bitch from the age of 3, possibly younger, but obviously I can't remember. She would let me know I was far less attractive than my other sisters, and also would make comments about my legs and how fat they were despite never actually being overweight. Anyway, I could go on and on, but you get the idea. I don't know why, but recently I've been having a lot of random memories from my childhood pop up. Not just of awful things my parents did to us, but of those people outside the family would treat us. I remember when the two main pharmacies cottoned on to the fact my mom was buying codeine in large quantities from both. The pharmacist screamed at me, a little 12 years old, walking in with a note written by my mother, who I was terrified of, about how he knew that mom was pharmacy hopping and that he wouldn't serve us again. He did this in front of other customers, small town, so people that I'd encountered before, and made me feel so disgusted and ashamed of myself. Another time was when I was part of a club and supplies started going missing, toilet paper, milk, Milo, and was completely ostracized, accused and excluded by the entire team of adults running the club. Even when the real thief had been uncovered, no apology or acknowledgement of mistake was ever offered. There was another time that my father had punched me in the mouth so bad that the inside of my lip was cut and spurting blood, which resulted in the exterior being bruised and swollen for a long while. Shop attendants in the town were very rude to me during the time while my lip was stuffed up. These are just a few examples of many. I would like to add that I don't believe I was an awful child. I never swore and, in my opinion, wasn't rude, always used manners, and was so painful shy to the point of finding it difficult to look people in the eyes because I truly believed I was scum. What I would like to know is why adults outside the family were also rude/unkind to me as a child. It's just now as an adult I've realized how fucked it is that random adults would treat a child that was obviously having an absolute horrendous time at home so badly. Story: Trapped in the Shadows. In the bustling city of Maplewood, behind the doors of a modest apartment, lived a woman named Emily. To the outside world, Emily appeared to have it all: a stable job, a comfortable home, and a charming husband named Mark. But behind closed doors, Emily's life was a nightmare. Mark was controlling and violent. What started as occasional harsh words soon escalated into frequent physical abuse. Emily was trapped in a cycle of fear and pain. She wanted to leave, but every time she gathered the courage to do so, Mark's threats and her own fears held her back. One night, after a particularly brutal attack, Emily sat on the bathroom floor, looking at her bruised reflection in the mirror. She felt utterly hopeless. She had no family nearby, and Mark had isolated her from her friends. She feared for her life and the repercussions of leaving. Mark had told her countless times, "If you ever try to leave me, you'll regret it." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Emily tried to hide her suffering, putting on a brave face at work and avoiding social interactions. But her colleague, Sarah, noticed the signs. One day, during lunch break, Sarah gently asked, "Emily, are you okay? You seem different lately." Emily hesitated, but the concern in Sarah's eyes gave her a glimmer of hope. She quietly whispered, "I'm not okay, Sarah. I don't know what to do." Sarah reached out and held Emily's hand. "You don't have to go through this alone. There are people who can help you." That evening, with Sarah's encouragement, Emily called a domestic violence hotline. She spoke to a counselor named Jane, who listened patiently as Emily poured out her heart. Jane provided Emily with resources and a plan to leave safely. The next few days were filled with careful planning. Emily gathered important documents, packed a small bag of essentials, and saved enough money for a cab fare. The night of her escape, Sarah waited outside Emily's apartment, ready to take her to a safe house. As Emily quietly left the apartment, her heart pounded with fear. She knew there was no turning back. When she reached Sarah's car, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. They drove to the safe house, where Emily was welcomed with warmth and compassion. The safe house provided Emily with a temporary place to stay, counseling, and legal assistance. With their support, she filed for a restraining order against Mark and started the process of divorce. The journey was not easy, and Emily faced many emotional and legal battles, but she was determined to reclaim her life. With time and therapy, Emily began to heal. She reconnected with her old friends, found solace in a support group, and even started a new hobby, painting. Her artwork became an outlet for her emotions, transforming her pain into beauty. Mark tried to contact her several times, but the restraining order and support from the safe house staff kept him at bay. Emily's confidence grew as she realized she was no longer a victim but a survivor. Years later, Emily stood in front of a group of women at a domestic violence awareness event. She shared her story, her voice steady and strong. "I was trapped in the shadows for so long, but I found the strength to break free. If I can do it, so can you." Her words resonated with many in the audience, inspiring hope and courage. Emily's journey from a life of abuse to one of empowerment became a beacon of hope for others facing similar struggles. She had learned that the chains of fear could be broken, and that every step toward freedom was a victory. And so, Emily's life, once filled with darkness, became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of hope. She knew that her story could help others find their way out of the shadows and into the light. Story: I don't know what to do anymore. As the title says, I'm fine with my mom cheating on my dad. I apologize in advance for bad English, and for not adding paragraphs the first time. I never support cheating, but in this case it's different. A few people know about this, and I need to talk with someone so badly about this situation. I've tried Discord and other social medias, but I never had the courage to talk about my family issues. My family is from South Italy and my mom and dad married in 2006. My mom says that ever since he got a job he's been acting differently. He's been really violent, aggressive, and anxious with excessive haste in doing things. She never felt calm being around him, she says. My mom during fights always tells him he's bipolar because one moment he's chill and one moment he would start flipping off over the stupidest things. When I was a kid he always used to kick, punch and break my toys when he was angry. He broke an expensive dollhouse I had that costed him a lot of work. Destroying random things he sees in front of him when he's mad is a bad habit he has. He doesn't physically harm me anymore, but when me and my sister were younger he always used to hit us and throw things at us when he was mad, leaving a lot of bruises. One day he beat my sister so bad she started vomiting all over the floor. He doesn't beat me anymore because I learned to not start fights with him. The only one he still physically harms is my mother. They fight almost every day. One of the main reason is money. We have huge economic problems. One day he almost broke her neck, and I remember seeing her on the bed unable to move for several days. My mom after many years decided that she was tired of her life and met another man that lived in Milan, North Italy, and now we're planning to go live near Milan after I finish high school here in South Italy. I hate cheating, but my mom always told my dad that she wanted to divorce him and that she wanted to get loved by another man, but my dad always got aggressive and violent over that topic. She's scared that if she finds out about her secret relationship he will do things that I can't imagine happening. I know cheating is bad, but my mom deserves to be happy too, and a man that treats her right. My mom is a kind person, and doesn't have the courage to report my dad to the police cause she claims that it would ruin his life. The thing is, even if my dad isn't the most peaceful person, his anger issues isn't the only thing about him. I know he loves me and my sister, he always roots for us, he's the one that introduced me to the world of cinema, which is now my favorite passion. We listen to music together and go to concerts together. The last concert we attended was the Eek a Mouse one. I know he's not really a bad person, he just has some issues he didn't treat when he was younger. I know that with the right treatment he can be the dad I always saw in him. He makes sure to never miss my sister's volleyball matches, and always gives her prizes after. He takes us to wonderful places, especially in summer. Most of the times he's here we laugh together, talk together, watch videos together. Sometimes he apologizes to my mom after fighting, and one time he brought her a big bouquet of flowers. As I said I know that deep down he is a good person. But at the same time, I can't forgive him for what he did to me, my sister and especially my mom. Avatar 3 will be released in December of next year, and it will be the first Avatar movie I will most likely see without my father. I cry every time I imagine him coming back from work and eating alone, without us. I love my father, but I can't forgive him. What do I do? Please help me if you read this. Story: abusive parent, toxic family, and high expectations, which makes me suffer endless even after being miles away. Currently, I am a 21-year-old student. I had to think of a way to escape my father because the abuse had been going on for a long time and no one in my family knew about it. I decided to study abroad because I thought it was the only way to escape, even if only for a short time. This was a decision I regretted because I was struggling in the classes of a course I didn't like at all, archaeology, which is not popular in my country, and I had to convince my family to take it. Study abroad. My parents also expected me to be the best and smartest student in the class. Since I was little, they always wanted me to study well and be smart. If my scores were bad, they would repeat that over and over again, and even if I got good scores, they still saw that they weren't perfect. They compare me with my smart friends and say I'm lazy and useless. They also forced me to study what they wanted after class 10. When I finished my studies, they put me in an engineering field that I begged them not to choose. I failed my classes and kept it a secret until a professor told my dad everything. Things got worse and I had to beg them to let me study another major, and finally they agreed to let me study history. After a year I endured in engineering. My grades dropped dramatically in 10th grade, which is when I realized I was being abused by my father. I hate it, I feel disgusting. I had to pretend everything was fine at school and at home. No one knew. I didn't dare tell my friends because I was afraid they would consider me dirty. I couldn't sleep without locking the door because I was afraid he would do something. I always have to keep an eye on where he is, or I will lose control for fear of what he will do when no one is there. I try to stay near or around other family members. I'm very afraid of him. Even now, I still feel like he is watching me and sometimes touching me even though I am thousands of miles away from him, which makes me always in a state of tension and unable to concentrate, happy or even relaxing. All my favorite things like books, reading time and car rides were ruined because he did something there and I felt like all the things I loved were tainted. Plus, my father has an influential job, so I couldn't seek help legally or from any organization back home. My family also moved many times, so I always had difficulty making friends. I rarely talked to others. To add salt to the wound, they let my younger brother do whatever he wanted. He played cricket and was very serious about it. They let him choose easy subjects for higher classes and the course he wanted for college, while I had to give up badminton, which I had played for 7 years in 10th standard. Because I'm not good at studying. I don't hate my younger brother because that's when family feels like real family, when I can play with him, talk about things we like and simply be brothers with fun games and competitions. Argued, while my dad was terrible and my mom criticized my grades and weight, calling me lazy all the time. In February 2023, near the end of the final semester of my undergraduate history major, there was talk about studying abroad and I jumped at the opportunity because I felt it was the only way I could escape from my father. They paid for my tuition and accommodation in the new country. But I feel useless here because I don't know what to study. I felt useless and stupid among other students and I felt very bad. I sought out a mental health counselor in college because psychotherapy became accessible for the first time. I still endure it because I have to call my parents every day. They make me feel guilty every time, saying they paid a lot of money, should study hard, get a job, and my mother talked about marrying someone and I should finish my master's program and PhD before age 25. I just want to drop out of college and run away sometimes. All I want is a simple job, not a high-end job like my parents want. All my life I wanted a small job, small things, and a simple life. I feel like I made the stupidest decision to come here because I didn't know how to study or even get a job. I only had 1 year in this country and I was always afraid that I would be sent home. I was tired and afraid that my father would find out I was failing my classes again. I can't go to class and face students and professors. Even though I've been here for 4 months, I still haven't made any friends. I do not know what to do. I can't live alone, have no job, no money, and no visa to do it. I want to stay in this country and try to get by, but I have no way to do that. How can I get away from my parents and only keep in touch with my younger brother? I'm afraid that if they find out, they'll do something to me, or they'll kick me out on the street and talk bad about me with my younger brother and other family members and friends. I can't tell anyone, that's why I'm venting here. Story: what the hell happened? I hate him and everything about him. My day is instantly ruined when I remember that he's still alive. He failed as a father to all 3 of his kids, and he can't accept that fact because he's so fucking proud and arrogant. So, he takes out his anger on us and hits us like it's going to fix a damn thing. All this money and respect he's boasting about having is going to mean nothing when he's dead, which is soon, hopefully. He thinks what he's doing is correcting me or disciplining me, but he's only creating an enemy out of his own fucking daughter. And that's embarrassing. He's so used to everyone around him following him like fucking dogs that he can't stand it when there is someone who does not need him at all. He fucked up with my older sister, so they don't speak now. He's fucking up with my older brother and doesn't allow my brother to pick my side because he's so fucking insecure about someone being sick of his shit. But my brother will eventually get older, he will no longer need to follow his commands, and he will get married, have kids, and will cut contact. Guess who's gonna be left to turn to? That's right. Me. It's all tracing back to me, but he thinks I'm just a stupid child who has no idea what the fuck I'm doing and will eventually crawl back. I've crawled back long enough. I've tolerated his bullshit for so long, but this is the fucking last straw. I will grow up to be better than him, I will study harder, top classes, get an elite job, all in the name of shaming him. I will embarrass him so badly. His own daughter growing up to be a better person than he ever was and ever will be. He simply cannot stand the fact that the world does not revolve around him and that nobody is going to live to his point of view. He didn't make me, he's not the leader of anyone, he's not the president. Even the president doesn't get people to follow his point of view. Laws exist, but so do criminals. My point is, he's not important. Whether he likes it or not, he's just another hunk and waste of skin and bones, a useless piece of God's energy and time. I will sculpt the best life possible, just to make him eat his disgusting words. I'm planning to cut him off once I head off to college in a different country. I won't even tell him I'm going. I will make sure nobody tells him I'm going. I don't want him at any of my graduations, birthdays, wedding. Fuck, I don't even want him at my funeral if I were to die before him. I'm using my whole life as a vengeance plan, to fucking destroy him. Karma is real, and it is coming in the form of his own daughter. Story: I was right about my stepdad. My mom got married to this guy after only knowing him in person for one day before getting engaged. I had a really difficult time with this guy because he was constantly making sexual innuendos to me about my mom and in general, behind her back. He played cruel mental games with me and my siblings. He was physically abusive as well, mostly to my youngest brother. But to my mom and the people in his circle, he displayed himself as an aging bachelor who always wanted a family. Everyone saw him as this kind, family-oriented, would do anything for ya kind of guy. He controlled this narrative that I was a messed up kid who was into boys, alcohol, and drugs. I barely experimented at 13, so minuscule it was laughable, so he had to keep a tight leash on me. I would try and tell my mom about how cringe he was, and she would always blow me off. After an especially brutal incident with my little brother, I reported it to a teacher at my school. Because of his good old boy reputation, and how he represented me as a troubled teen trying to cause drama, no one did anything about it and he actually threatened to kill me if I opened my mouth again. The happiest day of my life is when he requested to be transferred out of the country to make more money. He eventually divorced my mom, but before he did we had found this really explicit letter that a woman had written to him about how much she loved him raping her and how all she wanted in life was to be his sex slave. She went on and on about all the rough things she wanted him to do to her, and how often she thought of all the wild sex they had many years prior. She said she loved him and wanted to leave her husband to be with him, even knowing that he was married. My mom just gave me the rest of the letters she found over 25 years ago, and it was revealed that all of the letter writers talk about the wild sex that they had was when she was a young teen at summer camp, and he was her camp counselor. He was having rough, wild sex with a young teenage girl at summer camp when he was an adult. It makes me sick to my stomach to know that this is who I had been exposed to as a young girl at the time myself. My mom barely knew him and left me to live with him by myself for months. This also supported a suspicion I had that he had a sexual relationship with a girl I went to high school with, while we were 15 at the time. I didn't have proof, but I remember he had a secret meeting with her parents and all of the sudden she wasn't at school anymore. After he divorced my mom, she had found a pay stub showing he was paying child support for a kid we had no idea about. Long story short, this guy always gave me the ick. I was always uncomfortable around him and pleaded with my mom to see how sick he was, but no one would believe me. I was right all along. I went down a rabbit hole today trying to see if he ended up with the summer camper turned erotica/SM writer. She actually ran for a political position a few years after the letters were written. She has no idea where those letters are now. She has very specific handwriting. I would never publish these and expose her, but I can't help but think about how she has no idea of where these sensitive letters are. Story: my mom hates me, like really hates me. It sucks that my mom has to constantly remind me of all the things she hates about me, that it soon turns into me hating myself for it. From my physical appearance to my inner problems, she would say right to my face and wouldn't feel any remorse about I don't understand the concept of "we're hurting you because we love you." Bullshit. You don't strip your daughter's clothes off and say that you look fat and ugly while being hit. I experienced this when I was 14. You don't hit your child in the bottom with a metal stick. I blurted out that I wish I wasn't born, and she repeatedly hit me again and said I was ungrateful. You don't make your kid feel so shitty that it's to the point that they have to constantly cry in secret, and they'd say you were overreacting. I don't understand my mother. Does she hate me? She constantly hits me. She said the most brutal thing that could leave a child feel unloved and shitty for years to come. I understood that she came from a family where her dad, my late grandpa, cheated, and her mom, my grandma, had to work while my mom has to stay with aunts and uncles. I understood she was hardworking and her aunts adored her, but I can't help but hate her for all the things she put me through. I just can't, since it started at an early age. I'm the type to be more conservative. I would usually just hide myself face in a mask and constantly wear a hoodie. It made me feel secure. I felt safe. But once I take off that hoodie and mask, I would feel naked, exposed. I have anxiety when I take off my hoodie or show my face, probably from the years of constant bullying by my mom. She wouldn't shut up about my face and appearance. And when I try to go on a diet or to try to take care of myself, she would say, "Do you think you could still save what you look?" Which just brings me down. I developed body dysmorphia, wherein I can't even look at myself in the mirror or look at pictures of myself from my friends without thinking, "God, I look so bad." Recently we got to do a family photo for Christmas. As we took pictures, she would constantly look at me. After the photo shoot, as we started to leave the studio, she told me that the photos were great, but she said that my face ruined it. And that was really beyond hurtful. How could she say that? Her daughter, her first daughter. It doesn't change. Even if I'm already 19, I still live with her. She pays for my college and I want to finish my course as a fine arts student, but I often would feel like giving up, either to find a new life or maybe just end it. I really don't know what to do, and I just pretend that everything's okay while in reality, I want to just disappear. Story: regrets and isolation. Today's the birthday of my late father. I used to call him Baba, the Bengali term for father. It's not that I was waiting for this day. I just woke up in the middle of the night for the washroom, and after I tried to get back into my pity dreams, I was struck by today's date of September 1st. Initially I was like, something's today, but I can't remember what exactly it is. Not long before I realized it was the birthday of one of my loved ones, who loved me back. Well, I'm a 30-year-old guy based in Bengaluru, recently left my only job where I was earning just 5.6 LPA per month. Not enough for me to live a decent life in such an expensive city. Now I left it, so what's ahead? Nothing I know of. Don't have any contacts to support me in this situation. I always had colleagues and no friends back at work, owing to the social skills that got me here. Now with no job, no friends, no family, well, actually I realized no one cares about my existence. Well, I wasn't like that always. Rewind 10 years. To my college life at one of the most prestigious universities, pursuing one of the most lucrative streams, computer science. I had friends back then, even though I struggled to start conversations. My poor social skills, often pointed out by others, were one of my worries, but no matter how I tried, I failed. I accept the fact that I didn't get the best of friends because of this. All I got were extremely competitive or extremely light friends. I got trapped in between, was never able to scam my life, and just got pushed and crushed by the crowd. During my time at college, I had a loving family, but unfortunately, I didn't realize their importance in my life. Calling them every day at 9:30 was like a task that needed to be done. Never talked nicely to them, not like I was very arrogant or whatever, it was like I just answered whatever they asked in a yes/no manner, telling nothing about what was going on with me, or any interesting stories that they expected from me. Unlike my friends who were fully frank and expressive with their parents, I didn't feel right that time to share anything, for as I expected I might get a scolding in return, like lying to them about having food a mess. When things got worse in life, with poor academic performance and poor relationships, instead of getting emotional support from them, I did the opposite. I felt I could handle everything independently, and I stopped talking to them after repetitive missed calls, which frustrated me. Used to yell at them, thought they wouldn't be of any help to get me out of here. My parents were very sad at that time, not because he had to pay hefty fees despite my poor performance, but only because they weren't able to talk to the playful and honest child that I once used to be. That made my parents emotionally unstable, I guess. I had a small brother also, who grew up watching all these. We shared so much love for each other before I came to college, but now he sees these things happening to his parents. Our bond loosened. It was the 4th year of my college. The second cycle of placement season was going on, and I kept getting rejected because of my poor CV and grades. The placements ended, leaving me unemployed. Now I was more hesitant to talk to my parents, ashamed to even show my face to my friends. I thought of how disappointed my parents would be if they got to know about this, as they expected a lot from me before admitting me into this college. Little did I know how worse things were back at home. I got a call from an unknown number. I picked it up. It was my little brother giving me the news of my father's demise. He passed away due to heart failure, probably due to high emotional strain, provided he already had existing problems. I felt like a murderer. I hung up the call, completely blank and numb for some time straight. Then I had a panic attack, and the next thing I remember was I woke at the medical center. Everything flashed back once again, and I had another attack. My friends were sitting beside me. They knew what had happened. I felt ashamed for reasons unknown this time. I cried and cried and cried. I was given medications and discharged. Everyone was leaving college to get to their jobs. I, on the other hand, was confused as to whether to go back home, or will they accept me, but also wanted to see my father for the last time, even though it was his dead body. I was never able to deliver the love and respect he deserved. Without uttering a word to anyone back in college, I left, no goodbyes to anyone, and I never looked back. I reach home, and everything's devastated. Can't exactly remember what was going on, but I remember carrying the ashes and pouring them into some sacred reservoir. I asked my brother to give emotional support to my mother, for I didn't have the courage to. I left stating I had job interviews in other cities. Well, the truth was, I was homeless and jobless now. But I still had the degree, so I went to Bengaluru to look for a job. Well, I got one quick owing to my degree, but it was a call center kind job. While I had no complaints that time, I felt it was just the beginning and I had a long way to go. I had broken contact with every single friend I made in college, 'cause I felt utterly ashamed to talk to them. On one hand, where I was struggling to make ends meet, they were earning lakhs and crores in metropolitan cities around the globe, while some still tried calling me. Others, while they felt it was a waste of time, I believe, gave up to build contact again. I remained at the job for 2 years, living in a tenant-like house, occasionally calling at home. Every time I called, my mother broke into tears requesting me to come back home. Well, I thought she was just being emotional. Little did know she had been detected as a last-stage cancer patient and wanted to spend her remaining time with 2 of her kids. She never told me or my brother. I kept ignoring her calls. One day I received another call from an unknown number. It was my brother telling me the worst news I could hear at that time. I lost my mother as well. It was all over for me. I felt I had hit rock bottom, and I couldn't accept the reality. Anyway, went back home to perform the rituals. It was the last time I visited home and was with my family. Fortunately, my brother had already gotten into a prestigious university, which was being financed by my relatives, aunts and uncles. I wished my brother good luck and left. As my cab was taking the turn to the other road, I looked back for the last time, saw my helpless brother standing, and had flashbacks of all the amazing times we spent when he was just a little kid. Well, for me, he was still a little kid, wanted to hug him, but I restrained myself 'cause I thought he might hate me. But I remember when the last time I looked into his eyes, he wanted me to stay. I too wanted to stay with him as an emotional support, but with little to no money, I didn't want to be a burden to my relatives, fearing they might abandon us altogether. Hence, I left. Enough of the past, let's get to the present. As I said, I left my job and am now planning to leave the city, but nowhere to go. My degree is of no use currently as I'm 30 years old. Everyone wants a skilled guy to work at their company at this age. Well, my brother never contacted me since that day, nor did I. I didn't want to be that useless guy who would waste his precious time, though my heart was dying to talk to him. Anyway, I got to know that he got placed in a company with a great package abroad. I felt happy for him and I hope he gets a wonderful life ahead, forgetting all the nightmares he faced at such a young age. Well, what now for me, moving on to the next phase of life. Story: growing up in an abusive home. I, 21-year-old, was in and out of the foster system. My 20-year-old brother was adopted the first time we entered the system. I wasn't allowed to be because my mother decided that she wanted me. 6 years after she got me back from the system, my mom had another child with a different guy. At this point, I was 6, turning 7 a month before my youngest brother was born. My mom sent me to stay with my brother's grandparents every weekend and any time I didn't have school. My brother's grandfather started to molest me at the age of 7. After each time he did it, he would give me money or take me to the mall and let me get whatever I wanted. He would show me porn movies and tell me that's what he was going to do with me. Once I told him to stop and he pulled out a shotgun from under his bed and told me, "If you tell anyone, I will kill your brother and mom in front of you." The day I turned 9 was the first time he raped me. After, he took me to the mall. I tried to tell my mom about it, but she ignored me and hit me for making up stories. When I was 11, a family friend, police officer, asked me if I was okay and if there anything happening with my brother's grandfather, and I said no. Around this time my mom started using meth again and she basically disappeared. My brother and I saw her 2 times a week on her down days. When I did see her, she would scream at me and beat me. During this time we started going over to my brother's grandparents' house more due to my mom wanting to throw parties at the house. 5 months after my 13th birthday, I tried to kill myself. I was getting bullied and tormented at school. Outside of school, I was getting screamed at, beat and raped. I couldn't handle it anymore. My mom's boyfriend at the time found me on the bathroom floor oating and called 911. When I was 14, I decided I didn't want to go over there anymore. I was just starting high school, making new friends and starting paying a lot of sports. At this point, I saw my mom 1 time a week and the rest of the time I was taking care of my little brother. Took him to school, fed him, bathed him, helped him with homework and put him to bed. I started to miss a lot of school due to him getting out early than I did, starting later or just having days off that I didn't have. Teachers started to get worried and CPS talked to me. I lied and said nothing was happening. School year was over and summer break started. We started to see my mom more now and the abuse got worse every day. A week after school was let out for summer break, my mom found out I had a boyfriend. She started to punch me in the head and stomach, calling me a whore and slut. She kept telling me to admit that I was a slut. My little brother watched it happen and was screaming and crying. I wouldn't stop crying due to my head hurts so much. She told me to get into the car and drove to the ER. We parked, and as we were walking in, she changed her mind and said that she didn't want people to stare at her. When we got into the car, she accused me of being pregnant and forced me to go to the store and buy a pregnancy test. When we got to the store, she refused to go in and told me to stop crying when I'm in there. When I returned, she told me to just admit that I was a slut or to get out of her house. I packed a bag and went to my best friend's house. I was there for a week before my mom came to look for me. She apologized and said that she wouldn't ever hit me again and that she was so sorry and she loved me. I believed her and went home. Mid-July comes around and my mom woke me up screaming that her boyfriend at the time touched my brother and I. She called the police and they questioned us. They came to the conclusion that she was on drugs and detained her. Police waited with my brother and I until CPS came. My mom was put on a 5150 hold and both my brother and I were placed grandparents' house. That night I remember waking up to his grandpa on top of me covering my mouth. I felt like I couldn't move and started to cry. When he was done, he wiped my stomach off and went back to his room. After the 72-hour hold my mom was on, CPS told me I could go back home, so I did. For the first 3 days everything was fine due to my mom sleeping the entire time from being medicated. When she finally woke up, my mom's boyfriend was with her and she started to scream at me to get her belt. I did, and she started to hit me with it, told me that she didn't love me, that I was the reason why my brother got adopted all those years ago, and that she wished she never kept me. I went up getting away and I grabbed my already packed bags and I ran until I couldn't anymore. I didn't have anyone to call me besides my brother's grandpa. He came and picked me up from a park 2 miles from my mom's house. I was with him for 2 weeks until CPS showed up and took me to a permanent foster home. When I was visiting my brother, his grandpa would assault me and then give me $50. I was extremely happy in my new home. I finally felt like I had people that loved me and wanted me. After being in the foster home for 10 months, the family wanted to adopt me. My mom told my social worker that she thought me and the father had an inappropriate relationship and that they weren't pushing reunification. I was then taken from that placement and put into another one with a foster mom and biological son. It was hell there. She screamed at me, didn't take me to doctor's appointments, didn't feed me, take me to school or pick me up at 10 p.m. from work. I ended up in the ER for 7 days because I had an infection. She refused to take me to see a doctor when I asked her to. She allowed her son to hit me. I kept telling my social worker, therapist and CASA what was going on, and they told me I was being dramatic and that none of that was happening. Foster mom would tell everyone that I was a horrible foster kid and all I did was get into trouble. I started to heavily smoke weed and tried to stay at friends' houses as much as possible. My mom got into contact with me after 4 years of us having zero contact. She apologized to me and told me she was clean and asked if we could have a relationship. I was hesitant, but I didn't have any family, so I agreed. I went back to my home state and visited her and my brother for a week. Everything was fine. I'd never experienced this version of my mom before and I really enjoyed it. After 5 to 6 months of her talking to me all the time and being very nice to me, a flip switched and she started to ignore me for days at a time. Then it moved to weeks and months. I expressed multiple times that I really wanted a relationship with her and that I don't understand why she doesn't want one with me. Anytime she would talk to me, it would be about her, and then she would hang up and I wouldn't hear from her for weeks again. All I wanted was for her to be my mom, and she can't be that for some reason. The last time we talked she told me Andrew passed away, and I said, who is that? I'm sorry for your loss, and then she went NVM and I haven't heard back from her for the last 4 months. Story about how I lived with a toxic family, I guess. Here's a story about my toxic foster parents and my narcissistic foster sister. Back when I was only 10 years old, my mother was struggling with life, so me and my 4 other siblings were put into foster care since my mother wasn't a good parent to take care of us. Each of us were placed in different homes. 2 of my sisters lived in one home together, the other 2 are split apart, and there is me, who lived alone with no siblings at all. Anyways, as I was saying, I was placed in a Christian home where I lived with a pastor and the first lady and a girl named Destiny. Ever since I met them I thought I would be treated well, but that's where I was wrong. You see, my foster parents were strict, and when I mean strict I mean it. They didn't like that fact that I was drawing demonic stuff when I was only drawing silly harmless cartoons. Back when I was 10, I was the type of kid who was obsessed with horror, video games, and of course drawing, but none of those stuff were welcomed in that house I was placed in. Sometimes I was called the devil for the art I drew, and it was at the point where they even threw away my childhood toys I had as a baby that I had brought to that house as a comfort to remember my family and mother. I was only 10. They ripped every picture I drew that were demonic. They even treated me like an outcast and treated Destiny like she was the best foster daughter in the world. Destiny had the same interest as I did, but she was never punished because she was God's child. Destiny had got many privileges than I did. She would set me up for stuff, manipulate me, sexually touched me, etc. She always wanted attention when really I was the one who needed love and support. To tell the truth, I was jealous of her. She always got what she wanted. She even destroyed my stuff and got away with it, and the best part is she's the reason why my art, my childhood toys were taken away from me. Home wasn't the only place she treated me like shit. At school she would spread lies about me where at the point I wanted to commit suicide. She even hurt herself just so she could get me into serious trouble, and when I did she would laugh and giggle to her friends about it the next day. She would tell the school I was a Satanist. Reminder, I'm not 10 at this time where she starts doing her bullshit. I'm 12 at that time. She also fought me countless times over stupid stuff, and when I would fight back she would bring my foster mother in. Me, a 12-year-old girl, thinking that my foster mom is gonna have my back and help me and defend me from Destiny. No, none of that even happened. I was pinned to the floor by my foster mother while Destiny beat on me. When she got finished, I would be locked in my room alone to cry in. I reported this to my social worker, but nothing was done about it. Now let's talk about my foster mother and father since I got the Destiny stuff out of the way. My foster mother was the type of mother where she would dress you up into pink clothes, bows, and jewelry just for church, just to make you seem like the cutest thing in the world. But my foster father was just a mean man who yelled at me and called me terrible stuff just 'cause I was demonic. But anyways, my foster mother would embarrass me in the church and tell everybody that there's a demon in the church and then points at me. Everyone would look at me with sadness or a shocked face. She would tell them that I would worship the devil in my art I drew. I still remember that day where she called me to the stage and yelled at me for the demon to come out. I would cry for them to stop, but nothing worked. Now you may think this is fake, but this is real. Real stuff that happened to me. But yeah, anyways, they would yell at me for like 2 minutes, and when they were done they would say, "The demon is gone, child." I would just stand there in fear while I cried because I didn't know what was going on. And then the next day at home I was claimed to have another demon in me. Thank God I'm out of that house now. I'm scared to go in churches now because of them. I'm an American Muslim convert who was arrested, tortured and deported as a suspected insurgent from Egypt in 2005. So, I was raised a Christian. My mother was a very religious person. She wasn't practicing at all, but she loved her religion and she loved God. So, I think I have always been spiritual deep down. As a young and dumb youth, I dabbled in the occult and Satanism, but eventually grew out of that and was just a hardened atheist. Back in 2002, I ended up going to jail for a crime I didn't commit. I went to a warehouse with a couple friends whose father worked there, and they were grabbing a bunch of stuff they said was his. 3 months later, I get a visit from the police asking about a robbery at this same warehouse. Apparently, the kid's father had been fired, and everything that was taken was considered theft, and that's how that all happened. I was arrested and spent 4 months in jail before the judge threw my case out of court and let me out. Being an innocent man in jail, I had a lot of time to think about life, about my life, about justice, and how our system of justice is anything but just. I started thinking, if I could take my case even to the highest court, I would still be subject to the whims of a human judge. Maybe he had a bad day? Maybe his wife upset him or his kids. Maybe I look like someone he hated? I realized then that only God the Almighty could provide perfect justice. When I got out of jail, I was so happy to be free. My entire view on life had changed and I was no longer an atheist. I became firmly Christian and started going to church every Wednesday and Sunday. I was quickly discontented with the Christian church. So many things didn't make sense to me. I would ask questions like, Jesus was God on earth, yet in all his time on this earth, he did nothing at all worth mentioning before he started his ministry. What did he do while he was growing up? This is supposedly the Almighty God incarnate on earth, and he did nothing at all worth mentioning between the ages of 10 and 33? Stuff like that. This was around 2002-3-ish, the height of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and fresh off 9/11, and Islamophobia was at its height, and shamefully, I bought into it. After September 11th, I was the nastiest, most disgusting 24-year-old on the internet when it came to Islam. I bashed people and said and did horrible things to Muslims online. But after my time in jail, I came out with a new attitude. I realized that I knew nothing about anything and I was a liar. A liar to myself. I was speaking with a friend and we were talking about religion, and somehow Islam and Muslims came up. And I said to him, you know, I have spent the last few years hating these people and I honestly know absolutely nothing about them. I'm ashamed of myself, so I took it upon myself to learn about these people I hated. I would learn their religion and guide them to the true religion of Christianity. I spent the next few months obsessed with learning about Islam and Muslims, and I started to feel jealous of their faith, and their conviction and steadfastness. I was jealous of the Prophet Muhammad SAW. More than anything, I was jealous of his story and how every single detail of his life was so perfectly recorded. From how he was with his wives to how he used the bathroom and groomed himself. I felt connected to him, SAW. As I said previously, I had an issue with how we knew nearly nothing of the life of Jesus, before he started his ministry, so this level of narration and extreme attention to detailing the life of the Prophet, SAW, was very appealing to me. I studied more and realized that there was very little significant difference between Islam and Christianity, and after a whole lot of self-reflection, I made the most difficult decision in my life and converted and became a Muslim. Within 3 months I was on an airplane on my way to Egypt to study Arabic and Islam. I spent 2 years in Egypt, then made my way to the Sultanate of Oman for work in hopes of getting married and starting a family. I spent another 2 years in Oman working and traveling back and forth to Egypt to spend time with the friends I had made there. My story about my time in Egypt leading up to this incident is equally as crazy and long, as I won't go into everything here for the sake of time, but maybe I will go into how I met the people I will be speaking about here in a minute in another post if anyone cares to hear it. On one of my trips back to Egypt, I was introduced to my now wife. We hit it off and were married. I returned to Oman to work for a while to make some money and bring her with me. I spent 15 months working double shifts, and finally, it was time to go bring my wife home. I arrived in Egypt and everything was amazing. We had a great party and I spent that first night with my new wife. That night we were asleep. It was like 3 to 4 a.m. and someone was banging on the door. We woke up and went outside, and there were like 20 men in full riot gear and AK-47s. They grabbed me and threw me in the back of a truck. For the second time in 3 years, I found myself being dragged away and thrown into jail unjustly. In the truck was my best friend, a local doctor who I will call Doc, and about 50 other people. I was afraid, but I wasn't terrified because this was pretty typical at the time. I had seen dozens of people I knew get arrested in some spectacular fashion. It was all a big show to keep the people in line. They would pick people up on the street, torture some of them, and return them after a few days or so. But I could see by his face things were different. He told me, "Don't let them know you speak some Arabic, keep your mouth shut and do what they say." He had been picked up a few times before, and to see the look on his face I was terrified. They took my friend and the rest of the people to the local jail, but they took me somewhere else. When I got there, they put a wool blindfold on my eyes and threw me in a cell. I was there for a few days. I wasn't fed, wasn't told what was going on, just thrown in a room and left there for days wondering WTF was going on. After what seemed like a year, but was only a few days, some guy showed up and put the blindfold back on me and drove me to a place I later learned after the Arab Spring was called Behind the Sun in Arabic. A prison in Cairo. When I got there, I was brought into a room filled with human-sized cages. I wasn't put in a cage, I was outside them. This is where I learned later that they kept all the foreigners. The Egyptians were packed in like sardines. I could only catch small glimpses of the place because I was being watched 24/7, and any attempt to catch a peek was met by a jab with a cattle prod. I was in this place for almost 3 weeks. This was a literal terror dungeon with professional torturers who worked in shifts. Imagine having this job. You wake up, have your coffee and a scone, and off you go to your 9 to 5 at your friendly local dungeon to torture for 8 hours a day. Every day was the same. Heat goes off, the room starts to freeze, and you start to shiver and then shake. It gets so cold, and just when you think you're gonna freeze to death, they bump up the heat. Which is great at first, but they leave it on full blast all day. By the end of the day, you're drenched in sweat and dehydrated. Then they turn on the air conditioning again. During that time, first thing in the morning the torture would start, and all you could hear all day long was screaming and crying and begging. Occasionally the guards would walk by and kick you or scream at you, or just randomly while you were asleep someone would come over and use the cattle prod on your balls. Many people were tortured to death. I remember when the screaming would suddenly stop and you could hear the other prisoners saying, "From Allah we came and to Him we return," in Arabic, which is what we say when someone dies. Finally, my number was called and I was led into the interrogation room. I met the lead torturer, I'll call him Frank. Frank explained to me that he was going to ask me questions and I was going to answer, and if I didn't answer truthfully, I would be punished. He started interrogating me for almost 3 days. I had to give him my entire life story from my very first memory to the present day. I had nothing to hide, I had done nothing wrong, so I answered all his questions and did my best to be polite and not get my balls tazzed. I learned later that they used stretching, rape, and razor blades on some of the other people. I was never raped or severely hurt, but I was the anomaly. Being a white American and a Muslim, I was treated pretty well considering the situation. After my interrogation, I was taken back to the dungeon and I sat there for another month. I told the guy everything, and at the end he started to speak with me like a human being. I would even dare to say that I began to like the guy. When he wasn't torturing, he seemed like a decent dude. He brought me fresh oranges and other fruits and was very kind to me. He explained it that he was just doing his duty and trying to protect his country. He would stop by and speak to me about things a few times. He would even get a chair to sit and chat. One day he came and brought me to a room and he took the blindfold off me. This was the first time it had been off in almost 3 months. My eyes had swollen shut, I had an infection in my eyes, so the light was agonizing. I still have damage to my eyes all these years later. We had a nice conversation. He asked about my wife and said he had spoken to her and she would be there the next day to pick me up. Then he took me to a room with a bed and a shower. The water was cold, but it was the best shower I ever had in my life. I still couldn't see well, but I was so happy to finally feel free even though I was still locked in a room. My wife was supposed to be there the next day at noontime, but noon came and went, another day, then another day. No food, no nothing. Then like 3 days later Frank showed up and said, "I'm sorry man, but you're not going home. I can't talk about any more than that. Just know I apologize, and this wasn't our call." I was then taken from the room I was in back into the dungeon. I spent another 3 days in the dungeon until I was finally led away again. I was brought to another room and they took off my blindfold. 5 men in suits were there. CIA, FBI, 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 who knows who else. I was told by the FBI that I was being sent back to America to be questioned. As you can imagine, I was at the end of my rope, all the stress, all the pain and everything over the past months, finally thinking I was getting out to be with my wife and have them come and tell me I was being extradited to the United States. I was 100% sure I was going to Guantanamo. I had a full-on meltdown and nearly threw myself out the window. It was the one and only time in my life I ever seriously considered suicide. They calmed me down, gave me a Xanax, and explained that I was not under arrest, that I was not charged or even accused of any crime, and I would be a free man the second I stepped foot on American soil. He then informed me that my family in the States was involved. My uncle, aunts, of mother, father, my sister were questioned by the FBI, and one of my uncles was even put on the no-fly list. It even made it on the local news. I learned that my wife had traveled back and forth over 100 miles a day to the American embassy to get me out. Going to the US Embassy turned out to be the worst decision she could have made. My grandmother had even offered to mortgage her house if she needed to get me out. That my wife was pregnant with our first child. It was insane. I can't even explain in words how it felt to learn that people had not forgotten me. Turns out, torture dungeons are not good for one's mental health or self-esteem, and I often wondered if I had been forgotten or if anyone even cared. I think I spent another 3 days in the dungeon, and Frank told me that the Egyptians had tried to free me, but the State Department had told them they wanted me back. So, I was illegally extradited against my will. The US has no extradition treaty with the US. The State Department insisted that Egypt wanted me deported, but Frank told me there were absolutely no sanctions on me and I was welcome back any time, that he would even greet me at the airport. I did eventually meet him again, though not at the airport. I was put on a plane with 3 FBI agents and we landed in New York. The FBI joked that I hold the record for making it through JFK faster than any person post 9/11. We were landed and out the door in like 15 minutes. I was officially released under the condition that I would meet them to be debriefed. My mother was there to pick me up and she took me home to her house. I ended up meeting with the FBI every Saturday for 11 months. I was told that I was a free man, free to leave and go back to Egypt any time I wanted, but it would be in my best interest to sit through their debriefing, so I did. They went through my phone and made a list of every person in it and every single person I had ever met in my time overseas. And after 11 months I was told, "Thank you very much, take care of yourself," and I was basically told, "Have a nice life." And just like that it was over. I was free. At the time I was here in the States, my wife had our son. The first of 6. I jumped on a plane like 2 weeks later and was finally home with my wife, and life was great. A few weeks after I returned, I got a phone call from a private number. It was Frank asking me to come see him at his office. I went and he was very kind and polite to me. He apologized again for his government and said that no matter what I was told, the Egyptian government had nothing to do with my extradition. He said he just wanted to welcome me back and told me to have a great life. 20 years later, my wife and I are still married. We live in the USA now. My oldest 2 children are in Egypt, and we travel back as often as we can. Story: I'm sick. I, 21-year-old, have always been small, malnourished, dehydrated, and weak. I've been underweight and under height averages my whole life. I started puberty around age 14 with my first period, and I had finally reached a normal, albeit on the shorter side, height and a normal and healthy weight. Last month I went to an urgent care because I had been feeling fatigued, sluggish, constipated and depressed. I actually went to the urgent care several months ago for abdominal pain, which turned out to be extreme constipation, and I wanted to know what was wrong with me. I thought I might have been pregnant, but a home test was negative a month before, so I wasn't sure. They did blood work and diagnosed me with hypothyroidism. I've been doing research on it a lot recently and thinking about it. My primary care doctor doesn't seem to really know much about what he diagnosed me with, Hashimoto's disease, and had no treatments for me because he didn't want to give me medication. My blood work showed my hypothyroidism was fluctuating between low and normal, and didn't show grounds for medication yet. Some of the symptoms are fatigue, sluggishness, sensitivity to cold, dry skin, increased sleepiness, constipation, muscle weakness, aches, stiffness, joint stiffness, pain, irregular excessive menstrual bleeding, depression, problems with memory, concentration, puffy face, reduced libido. I've experienced all of these for years. The first time I can pinpoint it was around age 12, where the doctors told me I had low blood iron and I had to drink liquidized iron, take iron pills. I remember it tasted awful and it took months and months for me to feel better. This started because of a pattern of incidents at school, a 4 to 5 month period where every morning I was nauseous, sluggish, overheating, and in some cases threw up. The exact incident that pushed my mom to take me to the doctor was when I was walking downstairs at school, sat down at the top of the stairs, laid down and threw up yellow bile all over the floor. I was sent home. When walking outside to the car, I had to sit at least 4 times because I felt so faint. After my first period, I started feeling the problems with memory, joint pain/stiffness, muscle weakness, and an extremely reduced libido. Not that I was sexually active, but I had absolutely no sex drive and was not taking any medications as a teen. Since then, I feel like I've just been existing. Standing for long periods of time makes me feel faint and my legs hurt. In the morning, almost every morning, I feel nauseous and lightheaded as soon as I stand up/sit up. It's not always bad, but I've had a lifelong problem with this. I'm going to have a lifelong problem with this. I'm so scared for my future, for my relationship's future, and my future kids. I have no idea what my life is going to look like. I've had a few years where I felt normal, but I've had years, months where I felt practically disabled. This does not help that I've struggled with depression, anxiety, autism, and ADHD my entire life. I know there are people with much harder lives, illnesses, and situations, and I'm very lucky to be functional enough to keep a job and even go to school, which I started last month, but it's already feeling like too much sometimes. I'm just so upset. I'm 21 and I have never felt like the healthy normal young person. I can't exercise for too long or do sports because I feel nauseous and physically weak, as well as wheezing often, and I can't eat certain foods because of sensory issues. I'm most upset because my primary care doctor told me the only treatments are meditation and berry smoothies a couple times a week. I hate berries, but I'm willing to eat them. But meditation as a medical treatment for an autoimmune disorder? I seriously don't understand that. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.